The difference is the war is a larger state and battle is an expression of war. War is a state of attitude between two countries.
State of mind of the country.
State of attitude and relationship between two countries. When it turns hostile, it is called war. It may be called war. When it begins to give expression in the form of battles. So then the countries are at war. And unless a peace treaty or a complete victory of one party is effected, the countries remain at war, sometimes for hundreds of years.
True.
So each battle which is fought anywhere, or any spoil which is found anywhere between the warring factors, is called the spoil of war, spoils of war. Because it's not
exactly, sir. That's where I was bringing you.
Yes.
So that means, you see, when a battle is fought, you see, you are at liberty to take whatever you like from wherever in that country which is defeated. That could be called a spoils of war.
No, not necessarily. The fact is that in each, now you are trying to impose a thinking on the history of mankind. It's impossible. At each different period, the history records the customs and the code of conduct of various people in various regions. And we cannot impose our thinking upon those people. We have to learn from them what they thought and how they acted. So in each region, in each historical area, we find different applications. For instance, in some places, the women had absolutely no individual character. They were counted as sheep. And in those regions, in those historical times, they were counted as spoils of war. And in some other regions, the spoils took a different shape. So whenever you speak of spoils of war, you cannot impose your concept of spoils on any people or any time in history. So you must then particularize the customs and conduct. So if you want to discuss Islamic history, you must first define which era of Islamic history you are interested. And in that era, you have to find the customs of war of the opponents as well. Because Islamic conduct would not be understood without your understanding the custom and tradition of the hostile elements who are at war with some Islamic country. And this is not a one-sided issue that you decide this is spoil of war and they decide no, that is the spoil of war. Whichever country considers a larger area of things to be the spoil of war, the country at war with such a country has a full right to agree with that country whenever it wins and consider the same things as spoils of war which are considered by the hostile elements. Because the wars are balanced in this respect. If you attack someone and you have the intention of depriving him of all his valuables, immediately that right is transferred to that person, whether he himself believes in it or not. That's irrelevant then.
True.
So the spoils of war should be understood in this light, and first you throw some light on what you understand by the word spoil of war at the time of, say, Hazrat Rasul Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and then if there is an objection, then particularize that objection.
Now you have changed the whole concept of my question, you see, that the spoils of war are relative to the era, relative to the time,
of course.
And relative to the ethics of war that existed at that time.
Yes.
My point of objection, you see, which I wanted to raise against you and ask your comments on it was,
if it is was, then don't raise it.
That's right.
So if it's finished, finish it.
It's finished, you
Yes,
see, because
okay.
now the whole concept is changed.
That's right. Yes.
Thank you.
in this connection.
This was a book written by George Marshall about the occupation of enemy territory. In that book he has explained about the spoils of war and the war material which can be occupied by the belligerent forces anywhere they find. So anything by which an army can be prepared or equipped is called a war material. That can be spoiled.
But this is a modern definition. What I said was that no era has a right to impose its own definition upon previous eras and upon all the countries of that era. When two people go into war with each other, whichever has the more hostile attitude dictates the terms then, like they are leaders in races. That belligerent party dictates the rules for that particular war or that particular period. If the attitude of one enemy is that if I conquer you, I am going to burn out all your grains and fields and destroy all your property and raze everything to ground. If that is the attitude, then that right is immediately transferred to his opponents as well. If they become conqueror, they can do all these things without injury to their own moral concepts. This is what I understand is the language of war. And in this context, you should understand the spoils of wars in various eras of history in various countries. In the modern ideology, I fully agree that in the modern warfare, this is perhaps the definition. But it may not be accepted by Russians, for instance, or some others. I mean, they would not form their war policy after reading Marshall or any other British or American author. During the war, the pressures during a war fought in one particular era in history, the varying pressures also go on changing the code of life of each party, each side which is locked in war. Because at lower pressures your moral standard is higher. Increase the pressure and the moral standard begins to go down and down. They are always adversely proportioned. At one time they will readily agree that no chemical warfare should be permitted and this is inhuman and beastly. And when they actually go into war and they feel, one of the party feels that some advantage is to be had, they will not spare it. So the moment they do it, that right again is transferred to the other party. That is what I meant. Even if previously they genuinely did not believe it. But the moment one party exceeds the limit during war, that right is transferred to the opponent as well. Yes, who else wanted to ask a question? Please.
Hazur, there is a prophecy by Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam, Langar Utha Do. Now, one interpretation by our scholars is, as I heard it, I was told, that a time will come when the number of the community will increase by so many fold that it would be impossible to feed them at Jalsa Salana. And perhaps at that time we say Langar Utha Do, that shut down this hospitality system of ours. But at the same time there is a speech, I think it was a khutbah by Hazrat Muslim Maud Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu, and referring to the establishment of Rabwa, he said that a time will come or may come, I do not remember the exact word now, that we may have to vacate this place and move away to another place, and that Jamaat should be prepared to sacrifice, as the Bhatyari, the woman who roasts the grain, she puts leaves into the oven And in the same manner we may have to do sacrifice.